They grew up on the same street, a sleepy lane on the edge of town, where bikes rattled over gravel and girls shared whispered dreams under mango trees. Lina and Naomi. You couldn't say one name without the other. If Lina had a secret, Naomi already knew it. If Naomi had a fear, Lina chased it away. They were inseparable. Back then, life was simple. Second-hand clothes, school lunch swaps, sleepovers with candlelight during power cuts. They didn't have much, but they had each other, and that felt like everything. Lina and Naomi weren't just friends. They were sisters born of different mothers. When Lina's father left and her mother fell into silence, it was Naomi's home that fed her. When Naomi's younger brother died and grief hollowed her house, it was Lina who sat beside her every night, holding her hand in wordless solidarity. They grew together like intertwined vines, Naomi calm and observant, Lina bold and hungry for more. Even in school, they moved as one. Naomi had the patience for math, Lina the flair for words. They helped each other, tutored classmates, and dreamed about university. They talked of escaping their small town, not because they hated it, but because the world outside looked so much bigger, and they made a promise. No matter what happens, Lina once said, her pinky linked with Naomi's, we rise together. Always, Naomi had smiled, but life, as it often does, had its own script. It came in the form of a letter. Lina, the girl who once wore shoes with holes and used pencils to the nub, had been accepted into an international scholarship program. Full ride, business school in the capital, accommodation, stipend, connections. It was everything she'd worked for, everything she'd whispered under breathless stars. But when she told Naomi, her voice trembled, not with fear, but guilt. We were supposed to go together, Lina said, tears threatening. Naomi hugged her tight. This is your time. Go. Shine. I'll be right here. And just like that, Lina boarded a bus with one suitcase and a heart full of ambition. Naomi stayed behind, working at her aunt's tailoring shop, sending messages every week, always asking, "How are you?" But Lina's replies slowly thinned. The distance wasn't just in miles, it had already begun. In the capital, Lina blossomed. She learned to walk in heels, to speak in polished tones, to network, to dress, to brand herself. Her professors praised. Her internships rolled in. A mentor introduced her to a tech startup. She pitched an idea. They loved it. Within a year, she was part of the founding team, youngest among them, but sharp, relentless, magnetic, and money followed. Her phone changed. Her clothes changed. Her address changed, but Naomi didn't. She still texted her, still sent voice notes with updates from home, still asked, "Don't forget our mango tree chats," Lina would reply with quick hearts. Or a busy, "We'll call soon." But she never did, because the girl she once was, the one who shared school, lunch and borrowed dresses, was fading into the shadows of the woman she was becoming. And Naomi, she became a name Lina whispered less and less. The reunion came 3 years later. Lina had been invited back to speak at her old school, an alumni success story. She arrived in a sleek black car, sunglasses, tailored suit, and a subtle, gold pin engraved with her company logo. Everyone applauded. But Naomi? She stood quietly in the back of the crowd, wearing a simple blue dress she'd stitched herself. After the speech, she approached Lina with her signature shy smile. "Still? Remember our tree?" she asked. Lina hesitated for half a second, then forced a laugh. "Of course. God, it's been forever." "I brought your favorite biscuits," Naomi added, holding out a small paper bag. Lina glanced at her phone. "That's sweet, but I've got a thing in an hour. We'll catch up soon, yeah?" And with a hug that felt like a formality, she was gone. Naomi stood still, the bag of biscuits cooling in her hand. It was the first time she realized Lina had already left, not just the town, but her. The road home was the same. Same potholes. Same crooked signs. Same rusted roofs and sleepy chatter under acacia trees. But Lina, she was no longer the same. As her driver eased through the dusty streets of her childhood, she didn't roll down the window or wave to the neighbors. She barely looked up from her phone. She had emails to answer, meetings to prep for, clients to impress. And all of it, in her mind, mattered more than this temporary return. What she didn't know was that Naomi had spent 2 weeks preparing for her arrival. She had swept the little front yard where they used to sit and dream. She had sewn a dress using the exact pattern Lina had once called her favorite. She even cooked the stew Lina's mother used to make on her birthdays. Slow, warm, spiced with memory, and she waited. Not for the successful woman with red lipstick and foreign perfume, but for the girl who once split a single mango with her after school and swore they'd own a business together one day. But Lina never made it to Naomi's house. She had accepted a dinner invitation from an old professor. Instead, a networking opportunity, she told herself. She didn't even mention Naomi to the people at the table. When someone asked, "Any old friends still here?" she simply replied, "Not really. Most people I knew didn't keep up." That night, Naomi stood outside her gate with a Tupperware in hand. Inside was the stew, still warm, still waiting. She had heard from her cousin that Lina was in town, that she had come with tinted windows and walked past their street like it was unfamiliar ground. She stood there under the stars, heart torn between anger and hope. Maybe she was just busy, Naomi thought. Maybe tomorrow. But tomorrow came, and Lina was already gone. It was Lina's 32nd birthday. A luxury rooftop lounge buzzed with clinking glasses, designer heels tapping over marble, and curated laughter echoing off city lights. The guest list included influencers, startup, CEOs, and a few familiar faces from the business press. Everyone looked perfect, sculpted, rehearsed, polished. Just like Lina had wanted. She wore a deep emerald dress, custom-made in Milan. Around her wrist sparkled a limited-edition diamond bracelet gifted by a VC partner. Her hair was sleek, her makeup camera-ready, and the photographer she'd hired captured everything for social media. But in the middle of the party, she froze. It wasn't because of the lights or the sudden memory that struck her like a stone. It was the cake, lavender frosted, mango filling, Naomi's favorite. The same, one they used to make together with no oven, just a stovetop and faith. They had promised, "When we turn 30, we'll open our bakery, mango on everything." And now, here it was, served by a stranger, tasted by strangers, decorated by a chef who didn't know the origin of that mango dream. Lina took one. Bite. It tasted like guilt. Later that night, the guests faded away, one by one, leaving behind a trail of designer perfume and half-finished cocktails. Lina sat by herself, heels off, dress wrinkled. Her assistant came over. Everything went perfectly, trending on Instagram already. Lina nodded, slowly. But her eyes were lost, somewhere else entirely. She pulled out her phone, scrolled through old photos she had never deleted. There it was. A photo of her and Naomi at 16, frosting mango cake in chipped mugs, flour. On their cheeks, laughter in the caption. She hovered over the send to button. Her finger hesitated. Then dropped the phone. She couldn't. Not after how many times she didn't. Not after how long Naomi had waited in silence. 3 years had passed. Naomi still lived in the same neighborhood. But she wasn't the same girl. She'd expanded her sewing business into a full cooperative with 5 young women she trained from scratch. What began as kindness had become community. She had opened a tiny storefront with hand-painted signs. Her dresses, once considered too simple, were now worn by brides, students, and even one journalist who featured her in a local women's magazine. But Naomi didn't smile much anymore, not when Lina came up. Sometimes people asked, "Didn't you two grow up together? Weren't you best friends?" She always responded the same way. "We were." One day she passed a billboard, Lina's face on it, advertising her tech company's social impact initiative. Empowering women through innovation. The irony tasted sour. "She talks about empowering women," Naomi whispered to herself, but forgot the one who stood by her when she had nothing. That night, a storm rolled in. A real one. Wind, thunder, flood warnings. Naomi lit a candle and kept sewing. She had a deadline for a client's wedding dress. Power cuts didn't stop her anymore. She had learned to work through darkness because she had survived a darker kind. The silence of a friend she once called a sister and the wound of being left behind. The fall didn't come all at once. It was slow, like a crack spreading across glass. Invisible at first until it shattered everything. Lina's company had gone global. Investors were happy. The app they launched was doing well until the privacy scandal. A leak. Unintentional, but devastating. Personal data had been exposed, and within 72 hours, her face was on every tech blog, not as a genius, but as a CEO under fire. She did damage control, hired a new PR team, gave apologies that felt polished but empty. Her investors, once adoring, started pulling out quietly like rats off a sinking ship. Then came the lawsuits, and with them, the silence. Her phone stopped ringing. Her inbox dried up. The calls she used to ignore now never came. One morning, she walked into her office and found her name plaque already removed. Just like that. Everything she had built. Gone. But what haunted her more than the collapse was who wasn't there. Not one person from the gala. Not one from her curated list of connections. Not one voice that said, "I've got you." She sat on the edge of her bed that night and stared into the empty room of her luxury apartment. White walls, white sheets, white wine on a marble counter. It all looked clean, but cold, soulless. Naomi would have been here, she whispered. But Naomi hadn't been in her life for years, and Lina knew why. She had chosen gold over roots. Now, she had neither. Pride is a heavy thing to swallow. It tastes bitter. But Lina swallowed it anyway. She booked a one-way ticket back home. Not for a speech. Not for a ceremony. Not to be celebrated. But because she had no one else to turn to. Her suitcase rolled across the same gravel path where she and Naomi used to race barefoot. Her heels sunk into dirt as she made her way past familiar faces who barely looked up this time. She didn't wear sunglasses now. No sleek black car. Just a girl in oversized shades of regret. She stopped in front of Naomi's shop. It had changed, bigger now. Painted in soft lavender with a wooden sign that read, "Thread and Grace, handmade with heart." She hesitated before walking in. Inside, Naomi stood with a measuring tape around her neck, pinning a hem for a young bride. She looked up. Their eyes met, a silence so deep it made the fabric in Naomi's hands go still. Lina opened her mouth. "Naomi?" But Naomi turned to the bride and said softly, "Take 5, sweetheart." Then slowly, she walked over. The air was thick with unspoken years. Lina stood in front of Naomi like a broken statue, unsure if she was allowed to speak. Naomi crossed her arms, not cold, not angry, just waiting. "I lost everything," Lina said quietly. "I know," Naomi replied. Another pause. "I know I disappeared, and when you reached out, I stayed silent." Naomi nodded. "Yes." Lina swallowed. "You didn't deserve that." Naomi didn't rush to forgive. She walked to a small shelf and pulled out something wrapped in cloth. When she unwrapped it, Lina gasped. It was the old mango cake mug, cracked, but still there. A tiny piece of their childhood. "You left this," Naomi said. "I kept it. Thought you'd come back for it someday." Lina wiped her eyes. "I came back for everything I left." Naomi didn't say, "It's okay." She didn't say, "I forgive you." She simply handed her the mug. And for Lina, that was enough. The silence between them didn't feel like distance. It felt like healing. They didn't jump into deep conversation right away. There were no long apologies, no emotional confessions over tea like in the movies. Just two women, sitting in a small sewing shop, listening to the sound of a fan squeaking overhead and a spool of thread spinning slowly on a table. Lina sat there holding the mango mug. She ran her fingers along the crack that split its side and whispered, "This was always my favorite." Naomi looked up from her sewing table. "You said it was lucky." Lina gave a small, broken laugh. "Turns out it was smarter than I was." Naomi stood, walked to the back room, and returned with a second mug, its pair, the one they used to drink from as girls. She handed it to Lina without a word, and they sat there. 2 cups, 2 women. 2 hearts quietly realigning after years of fracture. Not everything was fixed in that moment, but something sacred had begun again. Over the next few days, Lina returned to the shop, at first hesitantly, like a guest unsure if she was welcome. But Naomi never turned her away. They started slow. One afternoon, Naomi invited her to help him a customer's dress. Lina fumbled at first, fingers clumsy with pins and thread she hadn't touched since they were teenagers. Naomi laughed, not mockingly, but with warmth. "Still better than some of the girls I trained," she said. They talked while they worked. Not about the company Lina lost, or the parties, or the scandals. They talked about the mango tree, about the time Lina fell off her bike and Naomi carried her home. About the time they tried to bake cookies using a candle and ended up with burnt goo and laughter that echoed through the entire street. Each memory was a stitch, sewing their broken history into something whole. And for the first time in years, Lina's laughter was real. Lina offered to invest in Naomi's shop. Naomi paused. "Why?" she asked. "Guilt?" Lina hesitated. "Because you're brilliant. Because I should have helped long ago. Because I want to help now." Naomi nodded slowly. "I'll think about it. But not because you owe me. Only if it makes sense for both of us." Lina respected that. She started showing up daily, not just to help, but to listen, to learn. She took orders, cleaned shelves, measured fabric, and little by little her hands remembered how to create, not code or slideshows or sales funnels, but real things, with thread, with purpose. She started to remember the joy of making something not for profit, but for people. One day, Naomi let her name be added to a new tag they stitched inside every dress, Thread and Grace, designed by Naomi and Lina. Despite the healing, old pain still whispered in the quiet moments. Sometimes Lina would wake up in the middle of the night, haunted by headlines that no longer praised her. She'd sit in her childhood room and scroll through photos of parties where no one checked in on her afterward. She thought about the friends she chose over Naomi, the ones who disappeared when the champagne ran out, and she cried. One morning, she confessed to Naomi, "I had everything I wanted, but I lost the only person I needed." Naomi, never one for dramatic speeches, simply said, "You didn't lose me. You just walked too far without looking back." Then she added, "But you're looking now, and I'm still here." That simple sentence undid 1,000 apologies, because forgiveness doesn't always come in grand declarations. Sometimes, it arrives in the quiet loyalty of someone who stayed, even when they had every reason not to. 6 months passed. The shop grew busier than ever. Orders came in from 3 nearby towns. A small article in a regional newspaper called Thread and Grace, a symbol of feminine resilience and local artistry. Lina and Naomi had found a rhythm. Each morning began with tea, each afternoon ended with fabric dust and laughter. It was the kind of life Lina had forgotten she ever wanted. Not flashy, not viral, but whole. She no longer wore designer heels. She wore sneakers covered in chalk dust. Her manicured hands now had pin pricks. Her calendar wasn't filled with meetings but memories, real ones, and people started noticing. A customer once asked Naomi, "Is that the same Lina from the city?" Naomi simply smiled. It's the Lina who came home. One day, while organizing the back room, Lina found an old notebook, her handwriting, Naomi's doodles. At the top, the Mango Tree business plan. 2 dreamers, 2 friends, a shared vision written in childish scrawl, with hearts dotting the eyes. She brought it to Naomi, holding it like a sacred text. "I think it's time we made this real," she said. Naomi looked at her for a long moment. "You really mean that?" Lina nodded. "Not for image, not for press, just us." Naomi opened her arms, and they hugged. This time not out of pain, but from finally finding their way back to each other. It started with a simple cart. On the weekends, they rolled out a wooden stand next to the shop. It was painted bright yellow, with mango slices hand-painted on the sides. They called it Mango Sisters, Fresh Bakes and Soft Beginnings. The community responded with joy. Customers lined up to try their muffins, cakes, tarts, all made from the fruit that had once symbolized their childhood, their promises, and their falling apart. Now, it symbolized rebirth. Young girls from the sewing class started helping out. People took photos. A local blogger featured them. Orders came in from out of town. But the women didn't rush to franchise or scale. This time they let things bloom slowly, because they had both learned that growth isn't just upward, it's inward. One warm evening, Lina sat beneath the actual mango tree, the one they used to lean against after school. Naomi brought over 2 mugs of tea. They didn't talk much. They didn't need to. Lina looked up at the branches swaying above. "I used to think success was skyscrapers and speeches," she said. Naomi smiled. "Turns out it was mangoes and mending." They clinked mugs gently. "We're here," Lina said. "We're home," Naomi replied. And in that simple exchange they knew they had finally arrived, not at a destination of riches or recognition, but at a place of meaning. Place they had both deserved all along, together. People often think fate is something sudden, a twist, a lightning strike, an overnight change. But sometimes fate is slow. It watches. It waits. And when the time is right, it catches up. Lina had tried to outrun it, chasing wealth, approval, image. And in doing so, she had nearly lost the very thing fate wanted her to see, that the truest riches are not in what you gain, but in who walks with you. Money made her forget Naomi. But life brought her back. And in that return was the, real reward. They were girls who dreamed under mango trees. One chased the sky and forgot the soil. But when the winds turned cold, it was the soil that held her. This is not a story of betrayal. It's a story of coming home. Because sometimes fate waits not to punish, but to restore. Subscribe to Modern True Stories for more emotional tales like this.